Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 4. As the thumbnail suggests, we will go interplanetary, and take the fight to our enemies today. We already know the effectiveness of our ballistic turrets, time to give missiles a try. But before we get to all that, we have a lot of work to do on our home planet. We will mostly concern ourselves with expanding our new manufacturing lines, and keep adding to the number of components that are fully automated in their production. We will also get started on a very rudimentary mall, where we only concern ourselves with the belts and inserters, at least for now. I want to get to a point where we can start using the tier 3 stuff exclusively, and then we will worry about the other items later. Only the blue belts will require some things that need quite a bit of work, so we will only go as far as we can today. Before we get started, if this is not your first video from this channel, you already know what to expect. If you want to be kept up to date, please consider subscribing, and if you like what you see, leaving a like will also help letting me know what to focus on. But enough talking, let's get into it. First things first, we need to double up our red science production. I will not worry about the incoming materials too much, but to reach a balance with the blue cubes, we need at least 12 labs worth of production capacity. At first, I tried to see if maybe we can squeeze in the other 6 labs near the existing ones, but I will soon give up on that, and simply rebuild them in a more open area. Try as I might, I simply couldn't do both the inputs and outputs in a neat and tidy fashion with the existing infrastructure. Yeah. Time for a new angle. If this place won't work, we can move to another. If there is one thing there is a lot of in this game, it's space. We are on just one planet right now. We have 2 more just in this system. And there are 63 whole other stars in this cluster, with planets of their own. So don't get hung up on that kind of stuff, we really will not have to worry about being too space efficient. Don't get me wrong. It's still a nice thing to go for, but it's not exactly essential. There. Couldn't be more simple than that. One side takes the materials in, the other side spits out the finished cubes. You might have also noticed that these cubes are actually glowing. Needless to say, there is a whole little subculture of artists in the game's fanbase who use belts and these science cubes as a medium to make pictures. Now, we can be pretty much certain that this amount of graphite will not be enough for these labs, so we will need to expand. Especially since that single miner we had before, was just about enough to serve 4 of the furnaces. Adding more of them onto a single coal patch will absolutely take care of the mining throughput, at the expense of depleting the deposit faster. The question is, will the belt be fast enough to handle all those furnaces? Doesn't look like it can. It can just about satisfy 6 of them fully, and the 7th a little bit. Ideally, we should have all of them running at full tilt. What we can do now is to use a balancer setup. We can use 2 inputs on one of these splitters, and use the other 2 ports as outputs, balancing the lines. Okay. I'm really not comfortable with that shape the belts are making. Let's give that another try, shall we? There. This looks a bit less, shall we say, problematic. It will take a while for things to settle into the new swing of things, so I just emptied out my inventory of all the hydrogen, and went on my merry way. The amount of expansion this dark fog hive made since the start of the game is quite ominous. I heard that they will not actually attack things that are in space, except for our mecha of course, so if we get to the point where we start building the sphere, it will not be in danger, but I still don't like the looks of things. I suppose we can start doing our mall on this side of the equator. As I've said in the intro, we will only really concern ourselves with the basics, belts and inserters, that's it. It will be the same kind of thing we had before. We will have intermediate chests for lower level versions, so we can use those as a dumping place for old stuff. We have a lot of orange belts that will need upcycling, and placing them in a chest will be a lot more convenient. Ideally, we would only bring in the raw resources, and make the needed components locally, but this is not the final mall, we can just leech off of the nearby factory arrays for this. Okay. I think maybe it's time to start researching the next upgrades for our construction drones. We will make them faster, and get 2 extra to work with. Definitely worth the time investment. We don't have the tier 3 belts researched yet, but it's right around the corner, so might as well place down the factory for them. And since the inserters will use the same exact arrangement, just with different recipes, we can copy-paste the whole thing to cut down on clicking. These chests at the end where the tier 3 stuff will be dumped into. If we need a refill, we can come here, control-click on the chests, and we will have 5 stacks of belts ready to be used. And yes, I did set the inserters to 2 stacks only. In my experience, that amount is acceptable this early in the game, and we can increase it as we expand our inventory size. I decided to move the inserter line, so we can continue with the iron belt. We only need the iron at the very start of the chain, but it will also help to have the shared components running next to the setup, so we don't have to split the belts up just for this. Now we need to find a way to feed all the remaining materials back there. We need the electric motors, and not just the old one, but the green version we started making recently. Oh, right. The green motors go into the last inserter assembler. We need the old ones in the middle. And we just unlocked planetary logistics. This includes not only the tier 3 belts, but the first towers too. The thing is, these towers are only functional on a single planet, and they can only handle 3 different resources. They have their uses, but I tend to skip over them, and go for the interplanetary ones, which can not only use space vessels for hauling stuff around, but they have 5 slots for resources, which makes them a whole lot more versatile. By the way, I just realized that I haven't even talked about the idea behind Dyson spheres. I mean, sure, anyone even remotely interested in astronomy are most likely already familiar with the concept, but in case you aren't, let me give you a small crash course. So, what if the most abundant source of energy we have? Is it fossil fuels? Not even close. Apart from the fact that they are the primary cause of our climate crisis we are just starting to see the opening signs of in the real world, it is also a limited resource, and once it runs out, that's it. It's gone. What about wind? It's a step up, but if we are honest with ourselves, it's just a secondary way of harnessing the best power source we have. Same goes for hydroelectric power. We are just harnessing the gravitational potential resulting from rainfall. What's powering all these sources of energy? The sun. Now, you might say, sure, solar power is great and all, but we have day and night on Earth, not to mention that clouds might also block the sun's rays from reaching the solar panels, even if it's noon. What if I tell you, it is possible to harness the sun's power output, without having to build massive solar farms here on Earth? What if we build them around the sun instead, and beam the power back using microwaves? And this is where science butts heads with science fiction. In most popular depictions of Dyson spheres, they are imagined as a singular hard shell enveloping the star. The problem is, there is no currently known, or even theoretically possible material strong enough to support such a structure. But that doesn't mean the concept is fundamentally impossible to put into practice. We don't need a massive rigid structure to completely cover up the sun. We can instead create a ridiculous number of solar collecting satellites around the sun. If we make enough of them, they will be capable of capturing 100% of the sun's energy, without having to build a single rigid sphere. In fact, that was the original idea floated by the originator of the whole notion, who is also the namesake of the concept, theoretical physicist and mathematician, Freeman Dyson. While the rigid structure version is what is usually known as the Dyson sphere, his idea was more along the line of the satellite version, which is known as a Dyson swarm. Now, I'm happy to say, this game we are playing right now is firmly in the science fiction category, so don't worry, we are definitely working toward building a rigid structure version of the sphere, instead of the swarm originally proposed by Professor Dyson. Well, to be more precise, we will be able to launch satellites into orbit, and they can be used to harness the energy of our star, but they have a limited lifetime, and the only permanent way of creating the structure will be with a proper sphere. Anyways, while I was rambling on, I did make a couple small changes apart from the belting of components to our mini mall. I noticed that the iron was really running low on the temporary main bus, so I gave it a boost by continuing the line feeding the steel smelters, and hooked the end back into the original iron line splitter. The steel still gets priority, but the leftovers will go toward feeding the other smelters. The other thing we managed to accomplish was the removal of the old belt and inserter factories. As I've said, we will slowly disassemble the old base, as the new ones takes over the different functions. In fact, I think we only need to get rid of the foundation factory at this point. Look at what we need to make the planetary logistics towers. We need quite a few things, most of which we have no access to at the moment. Sure, we have steel, but we have no titanium, and we need silicon to make the processors, and those purple particle containers are also out of our reach right now. We can only gain access to these resources if we go interplanetary. And you know what that means. Time to prepare for combat. I did empty out our research queue, and put the next mecha drive upgrade into it, which will unlock the cruise capability. That's just the game's name for space travel. After that, I got to work on making something that I wanted to try out ever since we managed to destroy that initial dark fog base on our planet. I am of course talking about missiles. I hear they are quite effective, and I want to see just how effective for myself. To make them, we need to put quite a few things into our assembler arrays, one of which are engines. Makes sense, missiles need some form of propulsion after all. Oh, what a glorious moment. We just unlocked space travel for our mecha. We won't use it right away, but don't worry. It's just a matter of time before we can set foot on one of our celestial neighbors. Next on the list of components we need for missiles are these combustible units. This is something completely new to the game. It seems it only needs coal to make, and would you look at that, we have a deposit right here. That is quite fortunate. Also, according to their description, they can also be used as a fuel source for our mecha, and it appears to be a basically better version of the graphite we've been using until now. Once we have enough, I think we can safely switch over to using these instead. Since I want to use these as fuel, I also added a small storage box next to the output belt, so we can steal some for personal use. At this point, we had everything we needed for the missiles. Time to set up the factories for it. Ever since we had the latest construction bot upgrades, our building speeds have really picked up the pace. And this is not even close to our final capabilities. That's the engine sorted. Now we only need the circuit boards, and we have an assembly line for missiles. I think I will even go as far as getting rid of the old bullets from our internal ammo compartment, and filling them with missiles instead. With everything sorted on the initial assembler, we can copy-paste it into the rest of the line. But maybe don't go too over the top. Maybe 4 will be enough. While the storage box is filling up, let's go and make some turrets. No point staging an attack if we have only one launch platform after all. Also, we are very low on soil. That's what is used to fill in the low-lying parts of a planet, like the oceans, and the only way to get more is from flattening hills. If you remember, we need foundations to fill in the holes left behind by the dark fog outposts, so we should plan accordingly. $400,000 seems like a decent amount. Now, about those turrets. The dark fog seem quite busy. There is quite a bit of traffic going between the central hive and the other planets. Let's not delay. Make the rocket launchers, and go! Well, I think it's time. Let's see what these missiles are capable of. Welcome to space. Whenever you take off from your home planet, don't forget to check your power levels. Making maneuvers in space takes a lot of energy, and if you run out, even a simple turn will end up taking a long time. Try to stay on target, and don't make unnecessary moves, or you might end up stranded. And welcome to our neighboring red stone desert planet. Full of much needed titanium. But before we get to building a mining operation here, let's make sure it's safe to do so. Well, time for the first test. I set up a small quad tower arrangement, filled them with some ammo, and then lured in a wave of enemies to see how we do. Well, I got to say, I am much more impressed with these than I was with the gun turrets. The knockback effect, coupled with the splash damage, makes these extremely effective. By the way, I had to lower the volume of these segments quite considerably. Even with the usual low levels, these missiles were distractingly loud. Don't forget, these are the most basic units the Dark Fog has shown so far. They are coming out of the lowest level outpost possible. I have a feeling we will need a lot more firepower as we get further into the run. Well, that's one down. But we have 2 more to take care of. To make our lives a bit easier, I also decided to set up a small temporary blueprint, with 1 power pole in the middle, and 2 missile turrets next to it. Should make the turret creep a bit easier to handle. I didn't even bother to give it a name or an icon. We will just delete it when something better comes along anyway. This is where the planetary grid fault lines show one of their faults. As the grid gets narrower, sometimes buildings need to be spaced more apart to avoid collisions. A lot of people have serious problems with this. Personally, I just try to work around it, but I can completely understand those who find it incredibly frustrating. It can be especially annoying if you rely on blueprints a lot. Personally, I tend to build things manually, and only start using blueprints in the late game, so it's not as big a problem for me. Alright, just one more base. And to nobody's surprise, I did forget to bring foundations with me to this excursion, so we will need to hop back home to fill in these holes. Having such a massive range advantage on our enemy is a really big help. Can't wait to see what else they have up their sleeve. I know a lot of people have some issues trying to attack the central hive, so things will undoubtedly get more interesting as time goes on. Hey, they are already rebuilding here. Well, we better start plugging these holes quick, before they regain their foothold. I even risked running out of power to make our flight back and forth quicker. It's risky, especially with the gravity well of the gas giant potentially messing with our trajectory, but it was important to be quick. Well, this one got rebuilt. No auxiliary buildings yet, just the central hub, but it's really sturdy, so we need more firepower. And that's that. We now have 2 planets completely free of the dark fog infestation. They will undoubtedly try to re-establish themselves eventually, but we will be ready for them if they try. We can use this planet to mine and process titanium, and the other one to make silicon. Knowing what to do, we can easily take care of that one too, and we should have some room to expand. I was tempted to quickly make another raid, but our power was running low, and we used a lot of our rockets, so we had to go home to regroup. Since the internal batteries were so drained, I gave the ice giant a nice big berth. If we got caught in its gravity well, and ended up either crashing into it, or worse yet, get flung out in a random direction, we would need a lot of time to make it back home, since we would need a lot of power to make a turn back toward the planet. And that about does it for today. We did relatively well. We managed to set up some basic mall functionality, and took the fight to the dark fog once more. With one of our neighbors liberated, we can set up our first proper off-world outpost, in the form of a small mining and smelting operation. The problem we have in fully taking advantage of this situation is that we have no interplanetary logistics yet. Whatever we make there, we will have to bring back home ourselves, and before we get to the point where we can truly call ourselves interplanetary, we will have needed to make such trips at least 2 or 3 times, if not more. And given the fireworks displays we witnessed today, we know that we will be able to defend our outposts, even if the dark fog manages to regain their foothold on those worlds. And before you ask, I did try to take the fight to the central hive structure orbiting the star. Let me just say, it will take a while before we can give that a proper try. Anyways, if you haven't done it already, I'd love it if you subscribe to the channel, and leaving a like would also let me know that this video was worth making. If you feel that it was good enough, and you can afford it, please consider going to my Ko-fi page, which you can find in the description, and donate an amount that you feel is appropriate. And if you did like what you've seen, there should be links to some of my other videos and playlists on the screen. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next one.